Hello and welcome to the Southeast Asia Talks with China Global South Project. I'm Edwin Sri Bimo. Today we are diving into one of the most important industrial shift of our time, which is the China's electric vehicle expansion to Southeast Asia. Well, in Southeast Asia, I come here using an electric bus, and when I went to Indonesia Auto Show a few weeks ago, I always overheard potential customers asking the marketing people of the electric vehicles, mostly made in China. First is how far this vehicle can go, whether it's electric car, electric motorbike, electric bicycle, and even electric tricycle. And so, electrified transportation now has been going up as a trend, and that brought me to this report from Rhodium Group, which says that China, for the first time, invest more on EV outside China than domestically. Southeast Asia these past few years, and perhaps few years ahead, are making ways into a manufacturing hub as a region. Not only cars, but also electric motorcycle, electric bikes, to electric buses. Just few days ago, BYD in Thailand starting to export to Europe their plug-in hybrids. So, in this discussion, we are with Bhima Yudhistira, Executive Director for CELIOS, a well-respected research and think tank covering economies, energy transition, not only in Indonesia, but also in the region. Bhima Yudhistira, hello, welcome to Southeast Asia Talks.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, so Chinese automakers are setting up shop across the region, shop not only for selling, but also for manufacturing. They are bringing assembly lines and they are bringing battery pack factories into Southeast Asia to countries like Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Vietnam. But the catch is that the core technologies, battery cell production and research and development are still concentrated back in China. So the big question is Southeast Asia gaining real strategic value so far, or is it being locked into a peripheral role in the global green economy?
The positions of Indonesia, I think, is very central in the supply chains of the EV battery and other technology for the automotive sectors because we have plenty of nickels. But the question is Indonesia in this whole supply chains of the EV battery gains more value added? The answer is no. Indonesia still exporting half raw materials products. One of the reason is because the FDI coming from China companies to Indonesia, there is very loose restrictions or requirements for the China companies to transfer the technologies to sharing the intellectual property rights to Indonesia domestic manufacturings. And many of the smelters that producing the EV batteries, stainless steels manufacturing products, I think they have a lack of transfer skills between the workers from the foreign workers from the Chinese mainland to the local domestic workers. But also in other parts, I think it's majority because of the investment structures, majority coming from China companies, China state-owned enterprise, and there is not like a balance of the joint ventures with the local manufacturings in the critical minerals industry. If you're talking about the electrifications of the public transport and also passenger cars, as we can see here in Indonesia, the South Korea automotive sectors with the EV technologies fighting Japanese with the hybrid cars, and also China is coming with the full EV batteries. I think that's creating like a competitions, and the challenge is the Indonesian governments some kind of having like the playing field between the Chinese manufacturings that first they can import the built up cars from China mainland to setting in Indonesia without having like factories in the first place. So it's like a special treatment for the Chinese automotive sectors. And we also see that compared with the South Korean Hyundai, they should build the manufacturing first, build the factories, and then they can sell the EV, the spare part of the EV here in Indonesia. So there is a totally like a difference of the treatment. So China actually have a special kind of a treatments, have a special fiscal incentive, and also industrial zone to sell their finished products. Even the factory still on the progress of building.
But Southeast Asia right now still at the stage of manufacturing, assembly, center of assembly, not yet center of innovation, not yet center for producing battery cell, which is the heart of any e-mobility. Cars, motorbikes, buses, tricycle, all requires battery cell, and that's the heart and the center of any electrification and e-mobility. So do you think Southeast Asia needs to go up the value chain to become innovator? How do you assess Southeast Asia? Is this region going to go up value chain? And if it is it in the interest of China to have Southeast Asia go up the value chain to enter the innovation phase?
I think it's totally agree the current conditions or situations that we are at the bottoms of the supply chains, the value added. So we call this is a periphery levels. It's a very early stages of the downstreamings of the critical minerals. While China, they get like a abundance of the technologies that should be shared with the local manufacturing here in the Southeast Asia. So we can build the domestic value chains, we can build regional value chains in the ASEAN countries, for instance. But the challenge is remains there is still lack of the transfer technologies, intellectual property rights sharings, transfer within the foreign workers with the high skills and experience to the local workers because they suffer from the skill gap. The vocational schools, the universities is not providing such a talent or skills to meet with the Chinese industries EV value chains. And on the others aspects, I think I just want to say that many of the passenger cars, public transportations that use electrifications model here, for instance, in Indonesia, in Jakarta, I think mainly is not composed of the nickel's battery components. Many of the passenger cars sold by the Chinese EV here in Indonesia is LFP, lithium ferrophosphate technologies. No need such a huge materials like a nickels. So in the value chain itself, I think there is like a huge gap. While 80% of the Indonesia nickels is suitable for the stainless steels, only less than 10% is for EV battery. So there is a technological gap, but also there is like confusions in the roadmap of the electrifications and what kind of Indonesian's company can fill those gap and bring up the supply chains, bring up the value added manufacturing.
Yeah, interesting. Quite a lot of homework and house cleaning if Indonesia or Southeast Asia wants to go up the value chain and become innovators, creating their own EV based on what they define what EV is, what e-mobility is. But is it in the interest of the competing great powers to transfer the technology and skill and know-how to Southeast Asian countries so that they can create and design and innovate their own? For example, do you think China has the incentive to transfer their technology to the point where Southeast Asian countries, for example, Indonesia or Thailand or Malaysia, can design, create, and innovate their own um, electric vehicles in many types.
I think those kind of incentive from the Chinese governments in the mainlands, I think there's still a lot of room to improve. So any overseas Chinese company that built EV smelters, downstreamings of the critical minerals for the transportations, transformations, and energy transitions, I think they should provide some incentives, monetary and also fiscal incentive. So the big question is those kind of the incentive actually is given by Indonesians governments. So some of the Southeast Asias they give like a tax holiday, tax incentive up to 25 years, free from the income tax from the corporate that invest in downstreamings. But the problem is those kind of the incentive, I think it's not translate enough into technological transfer because China and many of the Southeast Asia partners previously they have agreements like a RCEP, China AFTA agreements to ensure that there is no such a kind of pressures for the Chinese company to transfer the technologies, to transfer to know-how, technologies, worker skills to any kind of member state of the ASEANs. So if we want to start again, I think we need to revise many of the already agreements, free trade agreement, comprehensive economic agreements between the China and also Southeast Asian countries to live up, to increase the transfer of technologies, to give or sharing the intellectual property right in the batteries manufacturings. I think China will playing a long game in the regions for EV battery because there's a huge market in the Southeast Asia, and there is a growing push from the community, from the workers, also from the governments to ensure that any kind of foreign direct investment flow from China companies can transfer more technologies, can bring more job opportunities, also increasing the value added for the revenue for the industrializations in the country itself. So the second reasons I think it's because we think it's a fair game to see that the raw material producers countries also can enjoying more revenue from this whole ecosystem, not only extractions of the minerals, not only selling the finished EV cars to the Indonesian market, but also how to fill the gap that we call this hollow in the middles. So we have raw materials, we have finished products, even imported EV, but in the middles of it is a hollow. So many government want to fill that gap to ensure there is a increasing of the transfer technology from the Chinese company.
What can make those technologies be transferred to Southeast Asia, and what can make China transfer those technology?
I think previous examples from many countries, many host countries that can provide example of the agreements, example of the fair treatments between the host countries and Chinese investment or Chinese company. Let's look about the Brazils with the iron ore industrializations. I think it's because of the Brazilian companies, Vale, and also the Chinese companies. They agree to joint ventures, agree to shares the technologies to increase productivity, also to increase the value added that coming from the iron ores. So I think example from the South America will be a good example to see that it is like a both responsibilities, not only blaming to the Chinese counterpart, but also the host governments also need to understand when they agree to open up foreign direct investments, investments coming from the Chinese, for instance, Chinese mainlands. I think there should be see the domestic manufacturing capacities is the answers of these fair agreements, including the technological transfers, including the upscaling, reskillings of the current workers' conditions, even upgrading the educational systems and ensuring any kind of the fiscal monetary incentive that the host country give to the Chinese company can pay back in terms of the technological transfer. So it's very challenging and hard works to do with the host countries, but to have a set kind of a standards and lesson learned from the other countries as well. I think this is how we can play a game with the more fair treatment with the Chinese counterparts. I think each of the country have their own development agenda that is different. For instance, that Vietnam want to achieve superiority in terms of domestic technologicals and also manufacturing capacities. Even they're exporting the EV for the taxi in many of the Southeast Asia's countries currently. But we think also from the Indonesians' perspective, I think the bigger question is how to ensure that all the technological transfer that being promised is delivered, and the other thing is to bring more industry coming from the local players, not only the state-owned enterprise, but also the private sectors, even local companies that can be players or can be a supply chains champions, and then enjoying a lot of the benefits, value added revenue from this whole ecosystems. But we also see that to achieve those kind of dreams in the next 5 years, I think we can start first with the reforms, the public transportations, electrifications of the public transportations. So that's the Indonesians' needs because of the traffic jam, because of the fuels imports, the price goes up, goes down. I think that's answering the people needs. The other things is how the Indonesians also can be global players in terms of the at least in the precursors of the batteries or even finished batteries that using more nickels, not using others materials. But we can see that if Indonesia still see the same problems of only producing the raw materials or half processed raw materials, I think those kind of dreams to bring job, to bring higher economic growth domestically, I think still far away from the reality.
Thank you. Okay, my one last question before we close this discussion. If you have the opportunity to advise Xi Jinping, how would you advise Xi Jinping in how he or China should look at Southeast Asia?
I think Chinese governments need to see Southeast Asia not as a faraway backyard, but as a very close neighbor and also very close partners to build green industrial policy, to build proper supply chains, fair treatments, and also the benefit of sharings, technological transfers to lift up the workers' quality qualifications. I think that also help to bring more prosperity to the Chinese people itself and to ensure there is a stability, sustainability over long-term periods of the agreements. So if we want a win-win solutions, you need to treat any single countries that producing the raw materials with the more equal treatment.
Bhima Yudhistira, Executive Director of CELIOS, a well-respected Indonesian think tank who works at regional level, very respected in Indonesia and very respected regionally. So that's it for now, Southeast Asia Talks. I'm Edwin Sri Bimo. I'll see you next time with another topic.